Yeah, like.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Aces53 with Ed Parcaut and myself. Ed, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing? It's a Thursday.
I know. It's so close to the end of the week.
Yeah, and couple more days and I'll be in Vegas.
Oh, there you go. Renewing those vows like we talked about on Tuesday, huh?
Yep.
Well, actually, we'll be in Vegas. We just won't be hanging out in Vegas. It'd be really awkward if I went to help you renew your vows.
Yeah, no, thank you. You're not a minister.
You don't want to do a podcast from there?
You're not ordained.
I am ordained. I've married someone.
So have I.
There you go.
So am I.
Yes. So.
Isn't that the new thing? You have a driver's license from California and an ordained certificate.
I did some online class, the Church of Universal Life or something. I don't know.
You know where that's located?
Nope.
Modesto, California.
Is it?
Yes, because I did the same one and I had no idea it was right around the corner.
It's your neighbor Bob. He just puts out a certification.
No, that one's been around since the 50s into the 60s, and they first used it to not have to go to war, and then they used it for not to have to pay taxes, and many people used it for many reasons, but during the pandemic, everybody used it to marry people. So.
Gotcha. Did not know that. Yeah, I married some people 4 years ago in Mexico. So, hey, and they're still married. So
it must work.
That's right. But anywho.
All right, we got a guest today, don't we?
Yes, it is a Thursday, so of course we always have a special guest. We call a joker. What is a joker? A joker is anybody with a unique talent or skill that we think the listeners would benefit from.
And so today can speak better than Brian does.
Yeah, that's right, and that's why I'm going to bring him back on the stage. So I'm going to let Ed move us. Button. Dang it! I always screw it up.
Just don't mess around.
I know. That's why I should not be allowed to touch technology.
Yes, we know.
Yes. So many moving parts here. I like this.
No, it's really an ADD thing. It's a what they call it, a pattern interrupt.
Oh,
but on accident. Yeah. So anyway, everybody, welcome Jimmy. So AKA Coach Jimmy, if you follow him on Instagram, Jimmy Nelson Hayes, correct?
Oh, you're so close. It's Jimmy Hayes Nelson, but it's
I was right. I'm just dyslexic.
So much easier than Jimmy Hayes Nelson.
Jimmy Hayes Nelson.
Yeah, I had to go. Oh, you want to hear the quick backstory of that? I grew up as Jimmy Nelson and then moved to New York City to pursue an acting career. And when I got into the unions, SAG, Equity, if there's somebody that already has your name, you can't use that, which seems like a silly rule to me. Like recently, Michael Keaton just came out like within the past month and said his actual name is Michael Douglas. But obviously there was already a Michael. So all these years that we've known Michael Keaton, he's Michael Douglas. So when I got up there, my birth last name is Hayes, but I took my stepdad's name and had moved my dad's and my biological name to my middle name. And when I got there and they were like, you got to pick another, I was got cast in a TV show up there on NBC. So I got my SAG card and I had to pick a name. And so that was during the Brian Austin Green, where a lot of people were going 3 names. And so I went Jimmy Hayes Nelson. It seemed like a mouthful, but I would go in and casting directors would be Jimmy Hayes Nelson from Texas, and they liked it and it stuck, and therefore it has followed me since then. But yes, Coach Jimmy is much easier to say than Jimmy Hayes Nelson.
Well, yeah, I was lucky. I have the same. There's not many Parcauts in the world, so I don't.
No, you're good, man. Like absolutely.
Yeah.
There is a one Brian Galke. He's a very famous German dancer, which apparently he got all of the genetics because that is not my skill set.
He's a German dancer.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a Jimmy Nelson. There's 2 Jimmy Nelson, like famous. There's a ventriloquist from like the 50s, and there's an old black jazz musician that's also Jimmy Nelson. Obviously, I am neither of those either.
Well, maybe that's why earlier what Ed was talking to you about, you were just doing your ventriloquist voice.
That was
like it was coming from over there.
But my mouth moves. Yeah. It's a very echoey ventriloquist voice.
Right. So the way I met Jimmy was 2 years ago. You were emceeing at a Brad Sumrock event.
That's correct.
We ended up just hanging out in the green room behind the stage, and we were like, "Oh, where are you from?" I'm like, "Oh, Dallas." You're like, "Oh, where are you from?" Dallas. And it turns out we both like whiskey, which is a very good thing, and we live like 5 minutes away from each other. But what's really interesting is I just assumed you were only an MC. But as I got to know you, the whole thing is you help people and businesses kind of learn how to share their story with people. So how did you get started into that side of the business?
On the storytelling side of the business, it was probably like growing up, my background was as an actor and a performer. And talking about the SAG card, I grew up here in Dallas, had moved to New York City to pursue an acting career, and kind of stumbled my way into the health and fitness business. I used to be 100 pounds overweight and got involved with Beachbody, the P90X insanity and home fitness people. And when I moved up there, that's when they launched like their affiliate network marketing side of their business. And I had a friend that said, hey, you know, I think you'd be good at this. The ironic thing is I told him, I'm like, I'm not a salesperson. I'm just an actor, which is funny because now I help people sell things like using the skills I learned as an actor. But the public speaking side of things is I started going to events and helping, like, starting to build this business. And when I get to events, they would be like, hey, can somebody kick things off? Can somebody get on stage and share their story real quick? And as you guys know, like, so many people are just scared to death of public speaking. They can be super successful, but they get nervous in that. And that was the one arena I was like, oh, I know how to do this, from thousands of hidden hours on stage in rehearsals, you know, going to auditions and whatnot. So it started there in like these little rooms in front of like 5, 6, 7, 8 people. And then people like, how do you do that? I was too close to what I did initially to know. I think that it was something I could teach. And as that continued to grow and I continued to build my business primarily online, doing videos, sharing my story, people started reaching out and say, hey, can you help me with mine? And for the longest time, I thought it just worked inside of network marketing, or it just worked inside of health and fitness. And my dad, who's been in real estate for 40 years, was the first person to invite me. He was a broker at Remax at the time up in Plano. And he said, can you come talk to my real estate agents? And I thought they just wanted to lose weight, I guess. And he's like, no, you do a really good job of helping people kind of talk about who they were. And as I started studying specifically real estate agents, I was like, oh, they're really bad at this. It was just like, they were just pictures of houses and who their brokerage was. And so that's really where it started. And you know, bit by bit over the past, probably 7, 8 years now, I've been in business doing this whole thing for 17 years, but really for the past 7 and 8, it went to real estate agents and then financial advisors and then people with brick and mortars and athletes. And I think the other day I made a list and probably 50 different industries. Multifamily. I mean, I had actually helped Brad with his talk. I'd worked with Brad's highest level of their mastermind of helping them craft the story to raise money for their multifamily investments. So it's one of those things that sometimes we're too close to our gift to think, oh, there's more people that we can serve with this. And it was just these little baby steps. And the next thing I knew, that became my primary business.
I think a lot of us think, who wants to pay for this?
Your product and service, or your story?
Well, I'm just talking in general, when people are trying to help when we can help somebody.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
You're like, well, who would pay me to help them do this with this? Don't they have this knowledge already? And most of the most common knowledge is where you get to pay the most at.
Oh, absolutely. And I was just talking about this yesterday. Those things that come really easy to us is like the most challenging thing for somebody else, you know, where I was on a podcast the other day and I was talking about, you know, things like this. Like, this is my playground. Anytime I can be on a stage or in an interview, like, I look forward to that. I will have more energy after this interview, after our time together, than I did coming into this. But if you gave me something like a spreadsheet to look at, I would put my head down and take a nap right here. But there's other people that look at that and the numbers or the spreadsheet or the analytical things, that's their playground. But you're absolutely right. Ed. Like, there's things that we just take for granted. They're like, nobody's going to pay me for this because it comes somewhat easy to us. We don't value it the way we should.
Well, I hate to steal some of your thunder, but Jimmy, that's how everybody leaves after talking to Ed and I. So it really has nothing to do with you.
Everybody's just on cloud 9 after these interviews.
Yeah,
like,
it's just a natural side effect because we're just so jovial, you know.
The best Thursday of my life.
We're such stars that, you know. It's funny. One day somebody said to me, well, you're a radio star, you know, like saying, oh, you're so, I'm like, I am. Yes, I've been on radio since 2018, August, but I don't think of my way that. I just think I like telling people stories across multiple mediums. That's what I do. Yeah.
But to somebody else, they think like if they got in front of a microphone, they would be terrified. They would freeze. Like, to them, this seems like the most intimidating thing in the world, where it's become second nature to probably all three of us, as much as we talk to people or are on stages. And sometimes we probably take that for granted.
Yeah. I had a guy when I interviewed for this week from here locally for helping the Brave podcast. And I'm not trying to plug my podcast or drop names like Brian does. But I was like, oh, he is so nervous. You know, and it's like, I forget how we don't get nervous like that anymore.
Right.
You know, there's been times, even I spoke a few years ago, I did not speak anywhere close to I speak now. And when I was a president of my Rotary for a year, I was like, damn, I should have done that 3 years ago or 5 years ago, because you run a meeting each week for an hour, just like you're on stage for an hour each week constantly. And the more you do it, the better you get at it.
Yeah. Well, I literally, when I give my keynote speech, I remind people that sometimes they'll see, and then you probably guys get the same thing, like, oh, you're just good at that, or this comes natural to you. And while I do feel like there's some gifting there, I remind people, like, I literally used to have like a physical leg shake when I would get I knew this is what I wanted to do. But I think partially being 100 pounds overweight, I wasn't really comfortable in my skin. And then just not having the reps. Like, I felt like I wanted to do that, but this involuntary shake, I felt so stupid about it because I was trying to do my best. And, you know, my arm would shake, and you get, you know, those kind of tremor type things. And I tell people, there's still certain stages that I still get. I don't look at it as nervous, it's excitement, but it's still that a little bit of that. But I always feel like it's because it's important to me. It's an opportunity. So I don't look at it now as nerves, but I always thought, if that completely goes away, I've probably too checked out. Because I think we've all seen speakers that it's so like on autopilot, you know, that they're not invested at all either.
Yeah.
Yeah, Brian wouldn't be able to have a water bottle in his hand.
No, I couldn't have. I had to have a water bottle. It's the opposite. I couldn't have an open glass because you'd shake and water would go outside of it.
I thought you were going to say like your water bottle was like your whoopee, like you were Linus or something.
Yes.
You were like,
well, no, it's vodka. No,
you're grounded.
No, one of the first times they gave me a glass of water, and I went to go sip it, and I was like this, and water splashing everywhere. I'm like, water bottles from now on.
Good cut. That's a good tip. I hadn't thought about that.
Oh yes, because it, you know, water bottle, they can't see it shake as much, and it looks like you're just, you know, because the water moves through it so fast. But glass of water, it was shaking out. So yeah,
you had a Jurassic Park moment.
Yeah.
So so we're here to talk about AI. Is that what we're here to talk about today?
Yeah, I think so. How AI can replace all of us, and we are all out of jobs soon.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, you have to utilize it and you have to use it, because if you don't, and if you don't create stuff with it or make yourself better with it, you are going to be left behind. I mean, if you use it for, I mean, a lot of people use it for email. We talked about this before we got started. I just got an email about somebody who wants to be on one of my podcasts. And the first line is, I hope this message finds you well. Yeah. Well, I have no problem if you dropping it in ChatGPT and making it better, but take the first sentence out. It's the same sentence.
What I found with these AI tools, it's how do you train it? It's the people that write the best prompts that win. Like you were sharing beforehand, that I was making the joke about how AI can't necessarily write your story for you. And you're like, well, it depends on how much they know. And you said, well, you dropped your book in that. I was like, yeah, but you wrote the book first and then dropped it in and informed, you know, the AI about you. And I had this super talented guy on my team, Dave Ward, who does all our marketing, and he's kind of our AI guru. And he has created a prompt for us. So all of us are big fans of Mad Men, and there's a character on Mad Men that her name's Peggy. She's like the best copywriter there, and so we call her Peggy. And he has spent, you know, every week he is updating Peggy on what podcast we're on, what do we talk about, and so Peggy gets so good at helping to know who we are that when we ask her to come up with the newsletter or what's our next topic, or really one of the huge things there, learning what the fears and the concerns of our ideal client are. So we can then create more content, right? It's not so much about it just making the content for us. It's the AI and Peggy doing that, like, okay, what's the next piece? Because instead of us just talking about what we want to talk about, it really informs us and does all the research of, hey, he was talking the other day about public speaking issues and like these beta blockers coming up. And there was this entire thing about people that take drugs and like Adderall type things to get over anxiety to public speak, like things I would have never thought about. He's like, oh, here could be a really interesting conversation to go into, that people that can't be on these beta blockers feel like they can't public speak anymore. And so we've used it really to do research about how to create more content organically or in conversations than it just making the content simply for us.
And again, it depends on what you're using. You know, like on certain podcasts, you could drop into Cast Magic and it would create a newsletter for you and other stuff of the podcast you just had. So again, there's so many ways to use AI. I'm sorry, Brian, for cutting you off, but I wanted to be
I'm used to it. No, I was gonna say I knew a speaker who did shots of vodka before they'd go on stage. Not at corporate events, but at stages. Yeah. They had to go do a shot just kind of, and that was their routine, is one shot of vodka. They didn't come out slurring their words or anything, but they'd go out and go do a shot of vodka because they had nerves so bad.
That's kind of like a musician. Like how many musicians, it's like a little whiskey before they go out and they rock and roll,
Yep. Then you've got other people like I went and saw you on Amberly's podcast today. We'll be dropping soon. She does push-ups before she goes out to speak. I don't know if you've ever seen her videos, but yeah, before she goes out, she goes down and she's doing push-ups or jumping jacks and stuff like that before she goes on stage. I'd sweat too much for that.
Well, like Tony Robbins, he jumps on little trampolines.
Yeah, he does the mini tramp.
Yeah. But Ed, just saying, you were talking about also it depends on what you use. So Brian's a perfect example of this. Like the fact that your Instagram is blown up so much and you keep talking about tools like Opus AI or things like CapCut, like those are also AI tools that they're not creating something for you, but they're taking longer form content and they know exactly what the best clips are. Because back in the day, you would have a podcast like this, or you'd have a hour-long keynote, and I would have to sit and go, okay, and I would have to give timestamps to my editor being like, okay, I like the point I made from minute 2.3 to about this and this. And now CapCut's like, or Opus is like, this part's awesome, this is awesome, and it has a ranking there. So that's just another example of AI taking something that you organically did use in your gifting, but helping you, interact with more people or have a bigger audience. Cause then now you have something for the Instagram, or you have something for TikTok, or this would be more ideal on LinkedIn. Cause each of those are different audiences also.
Right. What I used to do is I used to write it down as I'm doing the event, whatever it is, like 20 minutes, whatever around this time is a good quote. So they could go in there and quickly get it instead of, because I hate paying for people for their time and wasting their time.
Yeah. To me, that's the craziest thing, because it's pretty damn accurate when it's like
better now.
You make this point. Yeah. When it first started, it was a little, or you'd have to kind of move things, but now it comes out and it's a ranking. Like, this is why this will do well. It's a 99. And then, I think the other thing, Brian, you talked about, and Dave does this for us, is just starting to drop in like even some extra B-roll. But it's funny because then you can take that and it finds the own B-roll for you. Like, it's just like, here, listen to this and tell me what's good B-roll. Every once in a while, we still kind of get some really there was a thing we were talking about people gathering around and telling stories. And there was this one that just looked like a seance, and people were around with a candle. And when he first sent it to me, it literally looked like some dude was like hovering over a crack pipe. And I'm like, I don't think that's the right B-roll for this video.
No, your story's so good it hooks them like crack. I mean, I don't know why.
There you go. There's the right for you.
But now you can even do AI B-roll with them.
Yeah, that's what he was using. But it was picking some very unique things. But I think
it would actually make the pictures and other stuff for the AI B-roll instead of what used to be. They would just pick something with what you said. B-roll. Now it actually goes even further than that. It's the next step to that. So,
and I saw one the other day that instead of just like these AI still pictures and stuff, but it's like full on like video, like it's some overlook of a mountain, and it's like, man, it is pretty crazy. But I think those of us that speak for a living, I think that's the way we can continue to leverage AI, is how do we enhance what we've just talked about to make it visually more stimulating for the audience, or how do we make the short form content with all these extra tools that used to take a lot of editing? Or I had a guy that I worked with in New York City forever, brilliant filmmaker, but he was expensive, and I would send stuff off to him or have him come in and like follow me around and do all the videography stuff, very much like back in the day it was like Gary Vaynerchuk and D-Rock, and now you can utilize AI to do a lot of that for you.
Well, back to Brian's blow up on social media, it helps, like we talked about a long time ago, engage your haters. And that has helped drastically engaging people and that's who helps blow you up on social media.
Oh yeah. That's true. The more controversial you are, and then even going back to like sharing a story or public speaking, lean one way or the other. I had an acting coach when I was in New York City, and this has played well for me in public speaking. It's played well with me and my clients. He's like, Jimmy, when you leave that audition room, he's like, I would rather than think two things, like that was the greatest performer I've ever seen in my life, or that guy was complete shit and he was awful. He's like, the minute you play the middle, he's like, you're just forgettable. And I think so many people with their story or their opinions or what it is they want to lean into are trying not to offend anyone, which in this day and age is nearly impossible. It's getting harder. So you might as well just lean into what you believe, and you're gonna, like you said, the people that are really in your camp are going to be like so hardcore in your camp, but absolutely all those haters are going to blow things up because engagement's engagement. So you might as well just totally lean in to whatever it is makes you you, and just lean into it 1,000% instead of trying to play the middle.
Yeah, but I don't think a lot of the haters is because of who you are. It's because they find something that they don't like. Like, I think, Brian, you blew up because you said something about your eyebrows above.
Yeah, I said right over your eye, and they're like, or I said right above your eye, and they're like, where else would an eyebrow be? And so sometimes it is saying that's why you should leave mistakes and typos in there. Don't put out the perfect video, because you never know what's going to get stuck with somebody.
Isn't it funny that there are people that wake up every day looking for that shit? It's like, what can I find on social media today to make me mad? And the best are the grammar Nazis, because I'm so not a grammar Nazi. Like, I just go and like mispronounce or mispunctuate something just so it irks somebody else and I get a comment.
Yeah, it's funny. I always go look, because I like to look and research who's the one making the smart ass comment. And like today, there was one, no, this is complete and total BS. And they have no posts, no friends. I'm like, wow, it's kind of funny how it's always the people with no posts and no friends who have the negative comments. And it's the Jerry Springer effect, right? Like back when Jerry Springer, he wasn't the best person to interview people. We watched to see what the audience was going to yell at the people that were on stage. And that's
where somebody that's creating. And it's always that, it goes back to that kind of man in the arena thing. Or I heard a song lyric the other day that was like the loudest, what is it? Something like the loudest critiques come from the cheapest seats. And it's never the people actually doing this stuff. It's the ones that, and half the time they don't have a profile picture. They have no friends. It's like, this is their pastime. It's just being trolls. But if you get some extra engagement out of that and that helps your reach, I guess they're like insects. Like they play a role in the ecosphere somehow. And maybe that's just their role.
Well, we talk about, they help you perfect your message, because somebody who's going to say that, being an idiot, somebody in real life is thinking it. And so you learn, how do you craft your response? If you ever ask that in person, or if you're on a podcast and somebody asks that. So they actually help you make your message stronger when you do it. And I do want to weave back to why you're here as the Joker today. And that is, you help people create their stories to talk about themselves, their businesses. So how do you do that? Do you go in and do you sit down and start extracting information out of them? Is there a list, like a checklist they fill out and send you? How do you start doing that to help people?
Yeah, I always start, we kind of reverse engineer it. So before we ever pick a story, because some people, they don't even know which story to tell.
Right.
Because it doesn't have to be a story about your business, necessarily isn't the most effective story. I tell a silly little story about singing on stage for the first time as a fat kid in West Texas in the first grade, is what I start my keynote with. But that took me a while to figure out what that had to do. So when I start with somebody, we always start with two clarity questions. Who is your ideal audience, and what problem do you solve? Right. So when I talk to you, Brian, all the time, like, you have this cool skill set, and I'm like, okay, what problem? Like, it's a cool, like, some people may look at me like, it's a cool parlor trick, it's a great bar trick, but I'm like, no, that can actually solve a lot of problems for people. Right. And so to get someone to go in and list out, it's like, okay, if I know how to read somebody and their facial features, what is that going to help me in a negotiation or the next time in front of somebody, or when I'm trying to influence somebody? So once we know that, then we know where we're going to go with the talk. Like, what do we also want them to do at the end of this story? Is it that we want them to sign up for a newsletter? Is it we have a paid offer? You know, in some places, it's just, can you get somebody to think a little differently or take action in their own life? It doesn't have to necessarily be business-wise. And once we know that, then we go back and figure out what story it is. And a lot of times I'll take my clients through what I call a story memory jogger. And we'll start with the business one. If their journey is the customer journey, that's usually the low-hanging fruit. So me and when I was in health and fitness, having lost 100 pounds, having had a lot of struggles, my journey was the customer's journey. But that's not necessarily the fact in everybody's business. So we'll take them through a memory jogger and just look for silly little anecdotes like, tell me about your first car. Tell me about your worst date. What was one time where you were really embarrassed? When have you been most proud of yourself? And I just get them to like start jotting things down. And we talk about that. And sometimes one of those little stories, which that's what happened to me, this little first grade story, and then I have another story about passing out chocolates in Times Square that I was like, oh, I could see where the emotional arc was. Because at the end of the day, each of our stories are going to be unique to us. I know nobody in my audience is probably 100-pound, used to be 100-pound overweight, 3-time college dropout. But if I can tell my story and then use what I call a universalizing statement, hey, for me, it was my weight and being in school. For you, it might be a relationship. For you, it might be money. But I know that there were times in all of our lives that we felt like we should have been further along. Or I know that there's times in our lives that we've all been disappointed with ourselves. And that's what allows each of us to tell our unique story. If it's a huge story, or if it's like some really little silly anecdotal story, it's then how do we universalize it and tie it back to an emotion or an objection or something that our audience is going through. And then we start teaching them the steps that we know to help them get to that final, what we want them to do at the end of the talk.
Mm-hmm.
So Brian, what was your first car?
What's that?
What was your first car?
Oh God, I had a Nissan truck was my first car.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
I had a 1967 Pontiac Catalina. It was my great grandfather's car. I think it was a tank.
I had a 69 Mustang.
Oh, what? Come on. It's your first car?
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yep. But it had the floorboards needed to be put back in, and there was a lot of work that had to be done to it. So.
Now mine was so it'll kind of.
I'm sorry, it was a great story, but the first thing you asked when you was what's your first car, all I was
wondering what your brain goes there, and there's always some emotional attachment, and that's what makes those good stories. Is there's some kind of emotional attachment to these stories of us growing up, and if you can tap into that emotion, or like, tell me a time when you were embarrassed, tell me a time that you were fearful. It's like these are universal emotions. Then we can add in our little details to take them. Where do we want to take them? Because at the end of the day, each of our businesses, we solve emotional problems, right? We just have to figure out which emotion that is and help them get over that, and then get specific about what it is that our specific product or service does.
Brian, you're going to say something before?
Nope, I'm good.
You're about your car or something?
Nope.
I always think about that truck. He's like, oh, I missed that truck.
I had a little Nissan mini truck.
Good times in that truck.
There were
what was her name?
Let's see here. No, I was doing this. Aha, let's see. There we go. Okay.
Oh, thanks.
Oh, yeah. So you can't type and think at the same time is what you're saying?
Nope, I can't.
Okay.
It's like juggling.
Oh, that looks like it's too long though. I gotta fix that.
Wellcraftedstoryworkshop.com.
That's it.
Well, you can also do storywellcrafted.com. It redirects there.
Yeah. So storywellcrafted.com is actually, you were asking, is there a checklist? Is there something people can see? If you go to storywellcrafted.com, that's the checklist. That's the free PDF. That's the checklist where you're actually going to see all the elements that goes into making a well-crafted story to have an impact on your audience.
So and that's your magnet.
Yeah, absolutely. And the workshops are 2-day workshops we do here in Dallas that we go, that's a deep dive. It's more of a boutique experience with 8 to 10 people. We spend 2 days diving into all these concepts, super deep, write the entire talk, figure out what the perfect stages are for them. And that's kind of the done with you / for you. But if you're just kind of wanting to know a little bit more about where do I start, and I'm not even sure I have the right story, and what are some of these memory jogger questions, just go to storywellcrafted.com, and that's the best place for you to get started.
Well, and what you weren't, so Tuesday, because I went and met you with Amberly, that's what we talked about on the Tuesday episode is, when I was at the Go High Level event last week, everything's about AI. And everybody's going, oh, good, man, if I start using this, I can get rid of these people and these things. And that's where people have to learn to stand out. Because, like I always say, the two types of AI are, you have to already be interesting. When people look you up, what's your brand? Why do they want to do business with you? And then you actually have to be interested in other people. But that first part of already interesting, that's their story. Yeah. When you get to know somebody, what makes you want to take the next step in business with them or the next place to go? And that's really what it sounds like you're helping people figure out.
Yeah. And I think some of those quirky little stories that aren't necessarily leading with their business, but it's let me know a little bit more about you. This is specifically when I was working with real estate agents, that happened all the time. My parents have been in real estate for 40 years. And what I always would tell those clients was, hey, look, I know it's not if, but when there's going to be a hiccup in the process, whether you're selling a house or you're trying to buy one. And so we would find, even if you and your agent, everybody does all the right things, somebody else somewhere else is going to turn in some paper late. Somebody's not as invested as the agent and the client. And so sometimes we would find these little anecdotal stories of a time in their life growing up or as a young adult where they did everything right and something still went haywire. Something still kind of came out of left field. And how did they overcome it? And we'd open the talk with a story like that, teach a bit of content. And then when they would come back in, that would be the tie-in. It's like, look, I can't promise there's not going to be a hiccup in this once you sign this listing agreement. but I can guarantee that you and I are going to do everything right by the book. And even if stuff kind of goes haywire, you want me in your foxhole, because just like, and they'll reference the story, when I overcame XYZ, we're going to do the same thing with you. And again, it just goes back to, because at the end of the day, even the most analytical people are still emotional decision makers. They just happen to like justify their decisions with emotion. And so it just goes back. That's where that story piece comes in, is making that emotional connection with an audience to help them feel more comfortable or be able to make that decision, because they're like, oh, there's something about that, the fact that both of you have experienced that emotion at some time, or that fear, then there's that connection there as well with you and your potential audience.
I just want to say, if people want to know the storywellcrafted.com, it's in his name.
I know, but I pop it up every once in a while too. People don't always look at the small print. We don't read the fine print.
Yeah, you better start reading that fine print. Yeah. So back to the AI. I look at AI's getting rid of the hard jobs that are the pain in the butt to replace constantly. Receptions, phone people who pick up the phone, certain things. That's what I see AI replacing right now. But they're not going to replace the higher skilled interaction with people jobs. And that's where you need to get to if you're not there.
Right.
I absolutely agree.
Soft skills are more important than ever. That's the big, we've talked about in previous episodes, but the whole intelligent.com survey where 53% of the new interviewees couldn't make eye contact, and 23% refused to turn on their cameras for a video interview, and 19% brought their parents. I mean, that's
wow.
You might as well be AI. Literally, if you can't make eye contact and you refuse to turn on a camera, why would somebody hire you or work with you versus a bot?
I said this the other day. It's like we've never had more ways to communicate ever in the history of ever, and we've never been worse at it as a species. Because everybody wants to hide behind a screen and they don't know how to interact with human beings. And
right.
And if you're not willing to improve those skills, and you're absolutely right, the jobs that you would have done will be replaced by AI. Because if I don't need your actual personality and your skills, then there's going to be an AI tool that can replace that. So people that don't want to be replaced, like as you said, Brian, you have to continue to invest in those skills and get better at those.
Yeah, I actually was brought in to interview with the city, a bunch of candidates, because they wanted a local businessman. And I would say 3/4 of them wouldn't look at you while they were talking to you. No eye contact at all.
It's nuts.
Yeah, it's horrible. And then how many people won't pick up a phone today? I interviewed a guy earlier today, and we were talking, and he says how he hates calling people. He wants to use AI to call people. I'm like, that's a job for a human.
Yeah.
Right.
Because you need to be able to hear the tones and inflections in their voice. And if they're actually being honest with you, whether you're talking to them, if you're going to spend that time and invest that time with them, they're not going to do it to you either.
Right.
Yeah. And it's funny because on the flip side, like an actual conversation can solve so many problems so much faster than emails or text. Like you said, the inflection. I mean, half my friends, I drive them crazy because I'm I'm like an audio text guy. Like, you're going to get a voice memo from me because for me, it's faster than typing. But there's I've avoided so many altercations or arguments or things that were taken out of context in a text or an email. It's the same way. It's those human skills of I can hear the inflection. I know what you mean. I didn't take it out of context. And the same thing with, resolving problems or morale inside there's times I'll come in and work with a corporate setting that are just wanting to improve morale. And I'm like, cool. What are your communication skills here? What stories are you connecting with these people? And no, everybody's per or my last email talking. Some people type already, the email, the AI email you said that you already got, which is ridiculous. Per my last email, which is just passive aggressive way to not fight, and go down the hall and have a conversation.
One of my past employees, I'd ask him, did you get a hold of somebody? Yeah, I sent him an email. No. Getting a hold of somebody is you pick up the phone, you call them, have a conversation with them, then send up a follow-up email to that conversation. That's how email is supposed to work. It's not the other way around. I sent an email. That's not getting a hold of anybody.
Well, the problem is we think in terms of CYA, cover your ass this day and age. And we talked about this. I spoke at a retreat, and they're like, hey, we're going to have to deliver bad news to our investors. And they go, well, I've been keeping on the text chain. And I'm like, that is the worst way if you have to deliver bad news, because text messages and emails are read in the voice in their head, not what you put down on paper.
Absolutely.
And, so I said, look, exactly what Ed said. have a conversation. You can even call them one-on-one if you're worried about somebody freaking out, or have a group call, then send the follow-up emails like, hey, just to kind of recap what we talked about, here's the things and the expectations. But they were sending text messages. And again, you don't know where somebody's head is at when they're reading the text message.
Yep. They're reading it in their frame of mind, not the person who sent it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Their frame of mind, whatever filter they have on it, whatever they're already assuming. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And if you're already delivering bad news and they see it and they're reading it as way worse news. So get on the phone. I get it. Email's good because we get into legal disputes and things. You have to go and look things up and have text messages and emails and all that. That's great. But don't start the communication that way. That's how you document what was discussed, not create it.
I also find, going back to the story thing, we did a training the other day with some clients about how handling objections, stories are the fastest way to do that as well. Because you can frame something before you give the bad news, an example, a story, and it can soften a blow about something, but it can give somebody a different perspective before you just go, bad news, just here's your facts. But if I can frame something in a story beforehand, then they may have a completely different reaction than specifically if they just got the text message or just got an email.
Yep.
And you also could tell them, all right, let me get through my whole statement before you start thinking a certain way, because I have a solution at the end, but I just got to tell you the problem up front.
Yeah, absolutely. You set that expectation.
Yeah. You know who's a master at that? Follow Chris Voss on social media. So I think his Instagram is the FBI. Let me find him real fast.
Oh, I just started following this guy. The negotiation guy?
Yeah. Oh, all of his Instagram is short stories. So it's the FBI negotiator is his Instagram handle, but it's Chris Voss, VOSS, like the water. And all of his are just little short stories.
Book up there over his left shoulder.
Yeah, right there.
I think it's a great bookcase so I can point at books so I can feel intelligent.
That's right. Well, you know,
I have all my name drops over here so I can remember who to drop.
Oh, I keep them right here on my teleprompter, you know. So, I mean, it's not like I put my own name as a website. So, you know.
Yeah.
It's the easiest way to find me.
I know.
I mean, if you just type my name in, you're going to find everything. So
that's true.
We had Parcaut out there. So.
Yeah, no need for 3 names for you, just me.
Yeah, there you go. All right.
What are you going to do? Are you going to take us out? We're done?
Yeah, I'm going to take us out. So we've already popped up here, but we'll pop it back in for the people who have really small vision and can't see what it is. But storywellcrafted.com. What's that?
It takes away everybody else's name.
I know. I'm going to pop it back down in a second. But all right, how else can people follow you on Instagram, Jimmy?
So yeah, go to storywellcrafted.com. You can find me at Instagram at the Coach Jimmy. And again, 3 names, because there's a nice gentleman who he's a grandfather. He's Coach Jimmy, but it's like I think he coaches his grandson's soccer team. And I've asked him nicely many times, hey, can we make a deal? Let me grab that handle from me. But you can find me on Instagram at the Coach Jimmy, or if you want to get that PDF, just go to storywellcrafted.com.
Just follow him for another 10 or 20 years.
Yeah, he's got to expire at some point.
Keep checking the obituary.
I was just talking. He didn't need it anymore. You're just rude.
Just counting down the days. Another day he marks a check off his calendar.
No, he's looking really healthy. He coaches soccer. He looks pretty healthy to me. So,
hey, can you in your trust? I will buy that from your family. Thanks.
Too funny.
No, I appreciate you guys having me on. It's always a good time coming in here and popping on. But I appreciate the opportunity, and hopefully people reach out. Would love to help them with their story as well to have more impact with their audiences.
Yeah,
thank you for being here. Go ahead, Brian.
I was gonna say, and soon Amberly will release your podcast interview. So that's Amberly Lago, and Jimmy was on that on Tuesday. So people can catch more of you there as well.
So always, those are always good conversations, and I appreciate that. And I know that introduction because of you, so I appreciate that as well.
Yeah, of course. So, all right, Ed, go ahead.
Oh, I can now?
Yeah, now you can. I bestow it upon you.
Thank you so much. Everybody, thank you so much for being here. Brian, Jimmy, thanks for being here today. Everybody else who's watching, I appreciate you being here. We're here Tuesdays and Thursdays at 10 Pacific, 12. What are you guys, Central?
We're Central, the most important one.
Well, I do it in what I'm at. That's all I care about.
Narcissist, time zone narcissist.
And again, we're here each week, and unfortunately, we're not going to. I won't be here next week. I don't know what Brian's going to do, but I won't be here.
I won't be here either because I'll be leaving Vegas on Tuesday, and then maybe I'll do one on Thursday solo. We'll figure it out.
Well, who knows? I'll get in there on Monday. We might meet up somewhere. We could do one at a booth somewhere.
True. We'll see.
All right, everybody, make a great day. Thanks. We'll be here in a week or more.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.